information lines of 6 over lines of 7 over lines of pi redirects the location system. Come into track lines. It's very powerful in line position locations where you come into passwords or anything in track calculations. Starting to recognize the atmospheres. The most important thing is to understand where you are and how to ground your system locations. Anything you have electronico or anything in that communication system. It's sure you understand the energy of the settings really to modification to its system all through calculations. Through its line setting where it has its constant location to its awareness. So in adaptability and line screen adaptation settings, the process of my computer line position location is different atmospheres and lines of space. So because you don't need a password, it confuses the ethereal cable and locations, network location of phone cable. So track lines, it knows exactly what it is in line position with settings through the operation system. So it's on that core track interference. Setting that lines of communication comes into the phone. Now the phone really comes into the conception where it really lines the signals and lines of adaptation to its calculations. Okay? So what that means is basically building that partnership with, what you can use the computer or what you can use to your phone. So I'm using this on the phone system now in settings. New track location, setting how to use the grounds, the powers, and the atmosphere, your highways, your modems, your satellites, and your towers. Okay? So I put up a lot of videos for everybody in that track location with settings, know exactly what's going on in the system. So it's important you guys get into that setting right now. We're coming into adaptabilities, we're coming into more processing, we're coming into more communications. We're coming out of the 144 in acceleration. Now the time sequence is now unlocked in signal. Now we have to really understand how this all works in all tractions. Getting in that direct signals is knowing exactly how to see it in platforms. Okay, so it's about really understand how to use the observation through your intent and influence of manipulation. Okay, it's very important to understand these things because you're in your game. Understand your game yourself is understand the levels of the game. Okay, it's like pawns on a connections of anything through a board, a game modulation screen or adaptation to a surface. Really understand how to use it through its set lines of communication settings. It opens all signals and modifications. Everything is moderation. So we have to understand how to use that in all lines of high correlations. Gets lines of platforms of communication to its balance. But it's really important to understand that through settings. So in that lines of communication system, I'm sure the team wants a track location. We'll have a Q&A. It's not going to be 3-4 hours in the line screen because I have adaptability again in track locations to come into the system when it comes into all levels into relaxation. Trying to get into that formation locations because general is more busy than ever now coming in that directions. So in that symbolism, that puts everything in platform. Okay? So in ground centers, we'll be in holodeck C, level A. Okay, for Q&A and settings. Alright, so in calculate modify, we'll get in line settings. We'll get into core track locations of platforms. Now, you guys basically have a test on the set lines of the cerebral. So what we're going to do is we're going to send our communication system. It's Friday, you have the weekend. Monday will be the review, and then in position location Wednesday will be the set position locations, calculation setting, and travels. See, the thing is, guys, I have a high correlation setting, high interference in that track calculation setting to all position, which means I'm extremely busy more than ever. So I got to get into window frames, how I can get into school, get into that set location to its system. Okay, so we're just going through review and evaluations and calculations. When I get back in track lines and high set locations and settings, once I get into that line communication to its system, then we get into the actual test. So we'll get a communication lines, you have the weekend line screen, get into the basic grounds, into the cerebral, and we'll get into the test. Because I know there's a lot to discuss too, right? When it comes to that modification. All right, so platforms are one cycle. Let's get in track location to its system, all through travel. And we get ground centers and line position location to its system, all through travel. Travel lines, communication lines of 1 and 3 lines of 6 over 8. That platitudes of locations in one cycle, one center, one service, 4 set correlation lines of travel communications. Setting lines of platforms and set it. Okay? Cross line calculations. Get into that lines is knowing how to direct and redirect your symbols in set calculations and traction. Okay? Know exactly how to put an XT1000 here, or an XT1000 here, or an XT1000 here in plateau. Any one platform, right? But what you have to understand and how it all calculates and modifies how you go in position to its equal line settings in direct and redirecting signal. Okay. Process communication ground centers, opens all communication settings of portals and stargates. And line communication setting of travel, directing signal location setting into direct and redirect, calculate, modify in wormholes and track location. Okay. So it's very powerful when you come into the tubings. Tubing comes in all communication lines of settings. All right. Know exactly how you can open up more lines of sequence, platitude line screens, and a 3-line cycle on generation. Okay. Process lines, optical screen lines, correlation setting of sonar, track the lines communication through the system. Cross-referencing lines into 4 to 2 screen lines and 3 travels and direct signal modification. Right. Setting calculation lines. Okay, directing signal locations. Now, how to deal with the cerebro is understand the graphs. The graph in communication, how it works in traction. Directing lines and cloud screens and line communication. Right, clouds in the system, right? So, and remember, day or night, it doesn't matter, okay, in any way and form. You just have to understand how to get in the observation mode. Understand your scan modes, okay? Understand the modifications of mode. Understand the self-identifications of modes. You have to really understand how this all works in your settings and track location, okay? All right, so as we come into coloration, it changes lines of time, okay? Calculate settings, lines of security, lines of setting, process communications, right? Ground centers lines of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 platforms as C, okay? Cross line reference, center core system, and travel in point lines of graph line setting locations, and Pluto in line position of 4 track location, okay? Now we go into the blue. Blue is plasma. We already know that in ground centers, right? Center position location of 1, center position location of 2, and track location, right? Directing calculation lines, cross line signals in location grids. Remember the location grid that crosses the communication system and all lines of communication to its higher self? Because it's starting to look like Spider-Man, right? Spider-Man colors, okay? I'm in his outfit, right? And then you go into the plasma, which is cloak and dagger, sending lines of communication lines of 2 track locations, inside position lines of 2 settings, okay, and communication lines of 1 setting track location, okay. So the more you get into it, the more you understand how to use it through the plasma line screen. It's the set position lines of high core track interference, and you can add green too, right? So crop circle screens, directed signals, and modification lines of 2 correlates and setting attractions and direction, okay. So it's very powerful once you start how to direct and redirect your line communication setting to your holograms and track locations. Comes out the equation. Okay. It's very powerful when you recognize these things and how it works. Right? So the cloud changes its position. All right. Let's see. Let's get into the cloud lines and direct signals. Okay, going over lines and high setting. Cloud line rotations. Now we have a cerebral cortex line to design line. Okay, travel position point graphs. All right. So obviously the ones that are in the retreat, they know exactly how to use the projector now. But now you understand the observation mode, because this is about understanding how to play chess and checkers and know the difference between, checkmate, and understand how you can basically move the pawns into different lines of communication in different universe. You have to understand how to use their mystical cortex, their simulation cortex, the calculation, the placebo cortex. Everything is a cortex of a coding system of a decryption setting location to its encryption. It's understanding how to coding and decoding its system, right? Binary lines and relying on rotation serve. Let's go into line communication setting that travels with point lines of purple and 2-track location. Right? Over across the screen. Setting overloads. Line connects to cloud lines of center communication setting of programs. Indirect lines modification. Okay, it's powerful stuff when you start to see it come to life. Setting that lines of communication high center interference. We're going to set a line communication site correlation setting to travels. Points lines of center, open signals, open channels, line operations surface and track location. Right, directing signals. Okay, so we have a black hole, line signal, line communication setting. Coming to communication lines at ground centers and line communication to a system through travel. Right? Directing panelism and line position of program lines. Okay, so we indicate one system in travel, point lines of setting, into all calculations modified. Very powerful when you come in that track locations, all through coloration lines and line screens, high calculations. Okay? It's pretty amazing when you start to formulate that and understand what that means, right? Okay, so getting into that position, we'll start with the cerebral cortex in one frame. Okay, so we're going to start with the lines into balanced lines of one set correlations into your alphabetical system. You really have to understand the more of the mind, the more you go higher, especially with the team, they have to understand the observation modes. It's important to understand these things because whatever you do here changes everything in position, what governs everything in settings, where you can actually take these out of place. That's why you have fail safes. Okay, so you can reframe, retrack, redivision, relocate its system and travel. So it's very important how to get into the setting position locations of platforms. We get a center's core system, central line settings, process calculation, right? Directing lines, I correlates lines of 3-track location. Okay. Symbolisms of 1, symbolisms of 6, 8, 12, and 20. Okay. Now, understanding the A lines, understanding the B lines, and understanding the C lines in track location, right? Sets lines, center communication, center communication, center communication line screen adaptation, right? Process lines of 1. Now, the communication ground center interference, we have a cloud line, screen, underline relays, setting lines of communication, setting position of this program, and track location. Okay? Directing calculation lines of cloud line, screen lines adaptations, and the other process lines of ground centers, location in all communication system, and its computer operation system. Setting communication lines of ground center line conditions at all levels. Setting cerebral cortex. Now, cerebral cortex is just a graph. It's a mapping sequence, line position locations, how to use it through the hardware. Calculate, modify, in ground centers into all levels. Same line communication setting in track location to its position and program. Okay, very powerful stuff, right? And then we do the line settings and height locations of C lines of A lines of center, and B lines of track location. Okay? Getting at the line signals puts all communication lines of Earth and track location, right? There's your Earth, right? So it has platitude screen lines of adaptation. Okay, one signal, one symbol. Set core line centers into one structure, one division, one location, one setting, a formula. Okay. So guys, you have to really understand how this all works in your system interactions. Now we go through coloration line screens, sending communication ground centers, one surface, one traction, one direct signals. 3 calculations in line settings and cross location. Right? Symbolism in the lines of 1, platitude lines of 3, 6, and 8, and line setting location to its setting. Okay, very complicated stuff. This is all done through the cerebro. Okay, the cerebro is the compute system. It's the correlation track to all of us at the placebo that puts everything to series A and B and C. Now understand the track location. It's just an alphabetical system locations. So it's all about understanding how to use it through a scrambler. It's all about understanding how to use it through the simulator. It's all about understanding how to use it through the simulation. Okay? So it's very powerful when you start directing and redirecting its signals in location to its settings, all through calculation. Okay. So it gets more tricky when you come into coloration, right? A lot more tricky. Okay. So you have to understand how to get into that through default general settings and that track location of the system. But getting the grounds lines, you have center lines of communication settings, right? That's process lines, open signals, files, and one set correlation, right? Directing the lines across line signals in one position on one platform, right? Directing modification lines of high correlation setting and travel and communication, right? All right. Platforms 3, setting lines of communication centers and line communication setting and travel, okay? Directing symbolism. Okay, come in line setting locations in all levels and rotation spin cycles and track location, right? Sonar detection in planet C, planet A, and planet B in line rotation. All right, 3 triangulation. 3 line setups in line position all levels of configuration of molecules. Directing signals and modification lines in A, set position of D, calculation lines of E, lines of factor over C. Okay? Now, directing line symbolism is to understand the formations going through the ground centers, the operation crop circles, line signal locations, crosses line symbols, and track location. Okay, it's complicated. The why it's complicated is the how. Now, understanding the graph is understanding the webbing system, how it correlates the settings and all lines of communication setting to travel in graph communication, right? So now we go into the grounds. Let's go through the green cycles, center position operation lines of surface. Okay, remember it's just a game. Planet setting, surface setting, operation system. as you see, I'm always in the same frame, but I'm in a different frame when I change frame. So it's kind of like, is there going to be space? Is there going to be time? Is there going to be no space? Is there going to be no time? Is there going to be a figure? Or there's going to be no figure? So I'm in control of what I'm doing through frame by frame by frame by frame. Now it works in seconds, minutes, and hours, or it doesn't work at all, right? Which means that you're just standing still and you're not doing anything, which is everything, right? So you're constantly moving. It doesn't matter what you do, right? Look at the patterns. See the patterns, how they come in information is the same. It's like an optical illusion, right? But if you look here and you don't look here, you can actually see them move where they want to move, right? Whatever you do here, they do. They move. Because, see? They move, see? They move on their own, right? So the axis cerebral is just a map that you follow. Okay? It's just a map that you follow. That's all it is. Nothing else. Change the coloration, 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 right? 3-track location lines of 2 V's, 1 center, 1 position. Okay? So it's a lot of fun. Once you understand how to get direct and redirect the signals, directing this way, okay, arrow indication, directing that way, okay, directing this way. But I'm not in redirect, I'm just in direct. So the cerebral cortex, the graph communication lines, the mind line adaptation system, let's go with the cloud lines. Green adaptation lines is surface and track location. Modification lines the screen, you know. Okay, so we have the green cycles and line communication. Base recognition, right? All right, so cloud 1. Now it gets complicated now because we add the A tracks. 4 A tracks and atmosphere lines, green adaptation. Okay? Equals lines of 1, and lines equal to lines of flux. Okay? So, setting communication lines of highest interference. Y lines setting A lines into towers of communication lines of 2 settings in traction, right? Directing lines of A line center into flux line screen and direct signals and modification. Okay? Now, getting point lines of settings, you come into the red, get calculation of fire and wire. The brain, the convergence in line calculation settings sets up frequency and line screens and direct signals and modification. Okay? Coloration lines, graph calculation. Let's go through blue plasma. Okay, we'll go through the data, OMI, and narrow links, and the network system and travel. Okay? Sending communication lines of grounds, set calculations. Let's go into visible chart screens. Now directing correlations, sync calculations. It's all communication lines of bounce and track location. Okay? All right. So as we get into that, we come into a universal line. That splits lines the A lines of 1 in position of 2 and 3 track locations of 4 and set correlation. Right? Now, that position lines XT1000 comes in. Now you can change the colorations anytime we want in tractions, right? We'll start off 1 signal and set correlation. And we set up line grounds into A lines into 2 track location. Okay, how they come together, the XT1000s, right? So this is where you start using the formula equations at a higher level through the cerebral, right? Because you have to understand how to go through the E factors and line communications of mass through pi when you go into higher levels of dimension, lines of space, applied to division. So we go through this location grid and setting, okay? And we go through these platforms in this set locations, the 3-track location, right? So, and that crosses line signals in 1 center, 1 surface, 1 traction. Okay? Getting communication lines of balance and crossing line calculation setting to Earth. See, your Earth is off. So it's got to rebalance its flywheel track lines of balance and communication. Okay? Finding the platforms of A lines of track is a triangulation split lines of communication, directing signals, right? Process lines of A and 4-track location of data. Data process line calculation line of high interference. So on the lines of A, B, C, and D in track location, right? XT1000 comes in, sets lines of communications, cross line signals, platform 1, docking 3, in calculation. Okay? This is all done through the cerebral. Alright? Alright, the sim cortex, let's go through mystical cortex line screen. Direct calculation lines of Sirius A. Alright? Ground centers, Y lines of flux equals lines of A. Okay, A equals lines of A. Cross line centers of B underscore over C. Okay? Now, we take communication lines of Y screen in a flux line communication, directing signals, right? Calculate, modify in line conditions of flux, capacitor, line screen adaptation, lines of surface. Track location, one center, one surface locations, directing signals, right? Now the A track location, one center, operates the system in direct and redirect signals, location of 0, gravity, and rotation, spin cycles, and track location, right? Process calculation line screen lines into the opposite cycle, sets lines of 3 track location, okay? So we add an energetic graph line. It gets complicated, guys, because we're going to higher lines of windows now in frame communications, right? So all you're working with is a box simulator, simulation box, or a computer framing box, or a mainframe box in track location. Okay? So understanding ground centers and surface lines of communication. Right? Alright. Set core lights and setting to interject dome lines, rotations, or I-line division locations of orbiting track locations. So we take the A-lines platform, graphical lines, and human residence, and line communications alpha line setting, process communication. Directing calculation lines across line signals in one ground center and one surface and track location setting. Okay, very complicated stuff, but a lot of fun once you know what you're doing, right? So, getting into that signal is really understanding the platitude location of your formulas and equations, guys, right? So you have to understand how the brain actually works to the hardware to understand the correlation setting to the software of navigation, right? Because what you're doing is the actual connections of the hardware, okay, is line connections of home beacon lights, home, right? Communication lines of the atmospheres into relays into dimension, okay? Track calculation lines of one cycle, one symbolism, one track location. All right. Setting communication lines XT1000 here, XT1000 here, and a 3-line rotation. Track communications, right? Cross-line signals, and back-forth line communication. All right. Plasma line energetic lines and a 45 split lines of webbing. Process calculation lines of waving cycles and a 3-line rotation surface and track location. Directing symbolism, again, in line conditions, or in circles, or in line screens as lines of communication, lines of waving line screen, adaptation lines of circuits and correlations. Setting communication lines of high center correlations of green, directing signals into graph calculations, green lines of adaptation. Okay? So, getting to that communications, you have to really understand how to set the tone lines. So, we got cerebral cortex lines of 1, 2, and 3 platforms and setting. Okay? Process lines of 1, 2, 6 over 12 and set correlation. Okay? So it's a lot more fun when you get into the light of color. Color helps you out formation, screen lines, adaptations. Setting black line screens, directing lines according to standard interference of 0 gravity and track location. Right? So you really have to understand how to use the communication lines of the brain, the frequency of the brain, the correlations of the brain, the track communication of the brain, the interface of the brain, the inceptions of the brain, the interline communication of the brain, interweaving of the brain, the code weaving of the brain, the cerebro. Okay, guys? So you're in the basic level of the cerebro now. Getting lines of communication. Let's start with the alphabetical line. Let's go through A track. Okay? Set position lines of B, set position lines of C, and set position lines of D. Let's start with that track locations, right? So we got a beta wave. Okay? And basically you have a communication wave. A communication wave is a line signal that crosses line center's location to its setting of center operation. 3 triangulation split lines of anomaly through a half pipe. Okay? So that's communication lines of directions and dimensions of space in track location. One center, one surface in track location. Right? Now, coming in the beta wave is a low signal, low ground center line screen location to its earth and rotation surface and track location. All right? And again, you have the A track lines, XT1000 here, XT1000 here, XT1000 here, XT1000 here, and 4 set correlations, right? Setting communication lines of ground centers, set position location to its settings, right? Polarities, right? Cross line signals, line condition settings of 1 and position of 2, and line condition lines of 3 and position location of 4 and track location. Directing lines of setting, torcal fields. Line set rotation routers and routes the system location of travel, okay? Directing calculation modified. All right, coloration lines of screen, point lines of graph. Change the coloration lines of the XT1000s to cloak and dagger. Set lines of 4, set lines of 5, 6, and set correlation. Okay? Now we go into higher lines of high settings. Cerebral 1, 2, and 3, and Simtex, and Quotex, encoding, and lines of configuration, screen lines adaptation. Very complicated stuff, right? So we get in position lines of the red line, security lines of panels, position lines of platform B, cross lines of C, A, cross lines of D, and E, and set location. Okay? So, setting communication ground centers. The Earth changes their settings, locations, settings, color. These all communicate through settings, right? So I'm just showing you so many different ways where you have to understand the platitudes when it comes to all communication in your settings at higher levels of the mind, right? Through the cerebral. Right? So the cerebral is the coordination setting, which is the center core of the nothing. But the position lines of track location, you have your lobes, frontal lobes, right? But you have 24 lines of lobes. Again, in that communication lines of 40 frames, and then you go into 72 window frames, and then you 144 crystal. Okay, that is stature, that is line communications at all levels that you have limit access to, that limitless system it travels. Communication ground centers in position of processing, okay? Setting communication lines of ground centers in one cycle, one surface, one traction, one division, okay? Okay, now we get into triangulation split, lines of 3 line, okay, and we cross line reference location lines of 4 track location. Communication ground centers into infinity and track location, right? Okay, simulation cross line condition settings, process line communications, high correlation set calculation, right? X2000 comes in 2 platforms and a 4 setting split lines of anomaly, okay? Cross line symbols, cross line directions, cross line 3, cross line 4, and track location, right? So all you're doing is you're expanding your minds now in your highways. Okay, and all formation location of ground centers in set correlations. Very powerful stuff. Set position, code weaving, code activation lines, code tractions, and direct signals to center. Okay. So the more you go higher, the more the X2000 will work for you. Okay, so they get you into light graph screens. Let's go into communication screen lines adaptations. Let's go into process lines. Go into direct signals. Okay. Get it into that communication, process your position location in the settings. Okay? So what you want to do is really understand how to formulate that, right? Understand how to go through the patterns. Understand how to weave the syslocation of settings, crossing symbolisms, calculate settings in line communication setting of colossals, interlocation lines to a system through pi. Okay? Everything is pi, guys. Everything is pi. So understand the mass line, the brain has line communications of all access to everything, all lines of all communicate to a system, because it knows exactly what it's doing through tractions, right? Set lines of B equals lines of C, C lines of flux in calculation, directing signal, right? Process lines of 1, set lines of 3, set lines of 6, okay, equals lines of clocking and track location, right? X2000 comes here, here. Remember, they're always there in position on standby. Okay? Cross line symbols, cross lines of B, cross lines B, lines of Y, calculation lines, X2001 platform. Cross line symbol lines of 3 over line, in line comes cross line reference, in positions all levels into X2000. Rotation of 6 over equal over lines of communication. Okay? So you have to really understand how they all work together. Right, how they formulate their settings, see location grids, right? And then use the platforms and communication lines of 3 tractions and direction, or you cross symbolism, cross-referencing signals and correlation, right? Track locations, right? Directing lines in one center, one surface, one traction, one division, one location. Okay? Very complicated stuff, but this is all through the cerebral. Okay? So your test is based on this. Okay? It's all based on how you come into the A, B's, and C's, into the atmospheres, right? There's an 8-track division. And you can't cross that. That's subterranean. That's beyond the line centers of the mind of the superconsciousness. Now, where you guys are in line signal is a higher level setting now. You have to understand how to use it all through process. Okay, how it comes in location grids. Okay. All right, so let's go through that again. Okay, so you get a better understanding. Okay, getting into the brain frequency lines, the brain patterns. Let's start with the alpha line screens. You start with locations, alpha. Okay, we go alpha, and then we go beta, and then we go theta. Okay, and then we go omega. Okay, so alpha. Okay, same communication lines omega, cross line, say location of beta. 4, right? 4 symbolism. 4 equals lines of 1. Okay, So 4 equals lines of 1, right? Here's the 1. Right? Setting lines of 1, setting lines of 2. Okay? Cross signals, line setting lines, and release and setting of track lines and division. Okay? So what the connection setting is, all lines of communication lines is travel. Understand it through the portals, understand it through the stargates. Setting track lines of platforms over cross-line signals in process communication. Okay? And again, cross-referencing. If you're cross-referencing, you got to make sure you know what you're doing in track locations, right? Platforms A, C, lines, 1 line, 2 line rotation. Okay? Process line direct signals in the opposite signals and line communication setting of 45 lines of angle. Process communication lines of pi. Process communication lines of pi in track locations, right? Process communication of probing is center core system of center calculation. Okay, very powerful stuff, right? And again, through the cerebrum. Right? So the connection to the hardware is the home beacon light, how it sets the position, location, and settings. You basically have to become your own programmers and understand how to direct and redirect your system through your relays. That position opens all levels into your plasma screen lines. Directing line communication, okay, directing line calculations, and direct signal, okay? So, XC1000 here, right? Sets communications, disappears, right, into the frame, okay? And then it comes out of the frame in your position of your setting. That's how it goes, right? Now it's in your universe because you're calling it, right? So, finger point line, setting direct signals. You guys have to start using your fingers now, tractions. Set position, right? Set signals, sonar comes in, comes a signal, right? Modification line sets up the crop circle, sets up the core center of interference travel. Okay? Cross line signals, line communicates the setting of sonar and track location. Okay? So for you guys to understand all this, is really understand how to use everything that you communicate to, right? So it's knowing exactly how to get to those levels now through the graphical screens, the alphabetical system, their structured divisions, how to use it through their cerebral cortex line, the mystical cortex, the matrix cortex, and the syntax, right? These are the symbolisms that you have to really follow, understand location of letters, again, communication lines of numbers, shapes, and symbols, right? Okay, so you knowing exactly what this is, this S, the system lines rotation, system location equal lines of L, crosses line signal. Okay? So narrow links, line condition setting, and 2 systematic lines of setting. Okay? Now, everything's created through a portal. Everything's created through a stargate. Now we understand how to travel through the 45 line split lines of anomaly. Traffication through a compass. Here's the compass line screen. Cross lines and 3 lines of communication of XC1000 in platform and track location. Directing signals, process lines of 1, 3 split lines of communication. Right? Now, it's very powerful once you understand pi of generation. Okay, look at that. See it on the 4-line split, right? So it's really interesting when you really understand how to use an all formations, right? You use the grounds, right? You start with the powers, the atmosphere, and the highways, and you get your modem, your satellite, your towers. But I've just shown you how powerful it is to finally get into your own processing system of programmers. Understand everything around locations is the program. These are locations. So calculate, modify. Let's go through this setting. Process 1, process 2, process 3, process 4, and process 5. Okay? So, window frame 1 and 3 and track location. Okay. Crossing the lines into 1 cycle, 1 center, 1 track location. All right? It's getting complicated, right? Very confusing. So we got lacing lines of communication lines of 3 frames in direct signals, right? Cross lines of 4 and 5 set correlation lines of traction, right? Doing calculations. Okay, setting communication lines of 4 settings in all positional webbing. Okay? Remember, this is all in the skyline. So XC1000 comes in 1 center and 2 lines in position of 3. Okay? So let's say you do a picture of a 4 different angle frame, right? You can have 4 different XC1000s on those different angles. Different intelligence, different formations, but it's in that frequency. Everything is a different frequency, always a different frequency. You're never at the same frequency. So understanding the cerebro, how it works in frame, then you understand how to use it through a mapping sequence in set position, right? So 1, 2, 3, okay, and then I got 2 at the bottom. So it's 5 altogether, right? 3 at the top, okay? Set position of 1, set position of 2, set position of 3, right? Set correlation line, high center of interference of 1, and position lines of 2 and track location, right? So that's 5 altogether, right? And again, you're working with the webbing system in frame communication and direct signals. Okay? All right, so it gets complicated. Now, get into that, we go into the blue plasma, and we go through the overcrossing string. Okay? Universal lines of track location. All right? Now it's getting interesting because now you're understanding more levels and how to go through the travels. Okay, directing lines and line position location to its window frame, box frame, main frame, triangulation frame, and the set calculation. Okay? All right. Now we go into cloak and dagger. 3 center calculations of screen in a 5 measure. And then we take it out. Okay, we take it out now. See, it's out. Right? So you're seeing 5 images of the same object in different lines of communication. So you have 5 different lines of x2000s in platitude. Okay, through laser grids. So laser grids are already set up. So in that position lines of track location setting, you have to understand how to set up the laser. Laser line screen lines of 1, setting lines of 2, 3, and 4 track location. Okay. Crossing line calculation setting overs. Over lines of 1, platform of 2, 3, 6, and 8, 12 and track location. All right? All through the cerebro. Okay? So if you understand this lines of track calculation system, when it comes down to line settings, how it comes in and out of formation location. Okay? So I'll show you again, because you're reaching higher levels of platforms of plasma now. Screens in that set correlations, all right? So, window frame. Okay, this is a window frame. Okay? All right, so as you look in the window frame, you have platform 1, 2, and 3 track location, all right? All right, and then we got the location grid. Okay, see that now? But we downshift the cross-line screen. Okay? So it overlaps the sequence in lines of panel. Okay? In a 3-charted wave in line rotation. It's really cool. So we set the locations, and let's go through purple. Go through purple, go through purple. Okay? Then we overcross line signals, and then we go into red. You have to add red. You have to add any lines. You have to add red, blue, and cloak and dagger right away. You guys have to get into that so you understand the traffic communication of the security line, right? Okay, then you go in cloak and dagger, and then you can add any color you want. So whatever color you're bringing in, every line signal XT1000 will come in frame because they control the frame, which is connected to the atoms, the molecules, and the structure of the location of the protons that change the fusion location setting and decision and track lines of communication setting and location to its photon. Travels in line signal is very powerful in set correlations. Okay, directing signals. Now we go into the blue plasma line over cross line calculations and communication. Okay? Then we go cloak and dagger. Cloak and dagger is going to be invisible in a 45 line screen in set position. Right? Comes out through equation. Right? So there's a lot of things you can do. So if I sim line calculation settings of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12, right? So that brings out 12 lines. Now, the XT1000s automatically know exactly what they're doing when they're in the skyline grid in your set location, or Skynets. That communication setting, they come in platitude, right? So they come in 12 different directions, right? 3 here, over cross lines, but you got to get in your formulas through your alphabetical systems, guys. 4 settings of 5 and track lines of 6 over 7 over 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 set position. Okay? 12 lines, 12 XT1000s. So they know exactly where they go in over settings. Okay? They know exactly where they need to go. Okay? They know exactly where they need to go in over settings. Okay? So it's a lot more fun when you have a laser track location of division of balance. Okay? And again, through the cerebrum. Okay, you guys are reaching those levels now, and you have to really understand how to use in all formations. Okay, all through a mainframe, circuitry frame, correlations frame, track frame, video frame. Okay, those are levels you guys are reaching now. Okay, but you have to get in your hands your formations, your ground centers, electronic location to its system, all through calculations. All right. Sound tone is extremely important in line position. Right? And calculations to its setting. Okay? So you just have to have fun with it, because it's a lot more fun when you just say, hey, I'm having fun here. I don't need to have fun because I know what fun is. Fun is what you make it. Your reality is already based in how you see things inside a position. That opens all levels of you and signal, right? Setting communicates lines. Flex over line, one setting, one center, one traction, one division. Okay, so how did I get that, right? Well, A lines of A equals lines of B. Okay, so B here is in the center, which is the balance, right? All right, so A lines of high lines, home beacon light of center and track location, right? Now, atmosphere lines of 1, flux over 4. There's the fork of the road. 3 forks, right? 3 forks in center position. See the 3? Right. There it is, right there in traction, right? Now we go through the line screen, direct location to its setting. Okay, crossing line communication. Okay, now in that lines, reroute the routers into circuitry lines and circuitry line communication setting the program. Direct and calculation lines, energetic dome, screen lines adaptation, process lines of 2 calculations. Right, cross lines 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms of communication. Okay, now black hole comes in and line signal in operation lines of surface. Okay. X3000 comes out at a position of 1, 2, 3, and 4 settings and travel. Okay? Cross lines of 1, cross lines of 2, cross lines of 3, and cross lines of 4 and track location. Okay? The higher you go, the more you see the XCs. Okay? The more they come into your frame, the more they come into your window frame of TV reception. Okay? All right, so it's getting complicated now, isn't it? When you're trying to understand what's really going on, right? With your system, it's like, whoa, okay, this formula, this equation is just off the charts. Well, that's what it is. It's just a TV. So this is it. This is it here, right? X2000 is here. That's how you see an X2000, right? Right? But as soon as you call it, okay, there's your finger, right here, right? As soon as you call it in, you set a laser to that XT. So that laser basically comes back to you through sonar. Okay? Now, in that position, if you take it out of take us out of this govern in line communication setting, you're bringing it forward now in position. Okay? And it goes through your plasma screen TV. Okay? And then it comes to you in your universe in position to its location. Okay? So that's why you have to be very careful what you're doing. Right? Because it's never far. It's always in the center of its operation. It's always in front of you because there's no front, back, or side, right? So it's always there. You just don't see it because it's invisible. So it looks like it's far, but it's actually here in set position to its location of center operation. Okay? Pretty powerful stuff, isn't it? Once you start recognizing these things and how to understand it through its connections, all through formula, all through equation. Okay? So, I know, it's a very powerful class. Hello. How's everybody doing so far? Now we're in 44 track positions at 20 cycles. But this is what it's all based on, right? You guys are now in the cerebral. And this is how you have to really understand how to use an information. Right here. Okay? So your test is based on how you see it. And how you want to use it and how you want to identify it. Because what you're doing is you're bringing things to you now, right? Everything you see, okay, you do not chase. You only attract, right? It's what you attract here Not through thoughts, through imagination. All right. So going through window frame, let's go through data platforms. Subposition one center, one tractions, overline signals, cross-line communication. Okay, that's not good because you crossed over the video screen, right? X2000 comes in, gets pinged in a 4-3 line settings and travels. Right? Communicates lines over breach into planet system of Pluto and track location. So it fixed the anomalies in its box ring, takes it out of the equation in settings, back in its system and travel. Now it can overlap the sequence, that's totally fine in track locations, but you have a dimensional door. There's the door that opens all signals. Platform 1, platform 2, platform 3, and track location. Right? Very complicated stuff. But then you actually see the window frame come in position of sonar that highlines the signals in location system of center communications. It's calculation. Okay. So it's getting more complicated. It's getting a lot more confusing, but a lot more fun at a higher level into the mind setting. But this is the basic understanding how to use an all-through traction. Okay? All right. I'll see you guys in 5. Adios.